Proposition 2 authorizes bonds for public schools, K through 12, and community college facilities. How did Proposition 2 get on the ballot? Well, in order for a bond measure to be referred to the people, to be sent to us to vote on it, it has to get a 2/3 vote in both the state Senate and the state Assembly. And what this box that you're looking at is the actual vote on this proposition. On the right-hand side is the California State Assembly, on the left-hand side, the California State Senate. As you can see, the final vote was 72-1 in favor, with 6 not voting. It was overwhelmingly supported by Democrats. Every Democrat voted for it except one who didn't vote. And Republicans in the State Assembly also were overwhelmingly in favor of it, 11 in favor, 1 against, with 5 not voting. In the state Senate, it also received overwhelming support. 34 voted in favor, 3 against, with 3 not voting. The Democrats were unanimous in favor of it, 30 in favor, none against, with 1 not voting. And the Republicans in the state Senate were split, 3 in favor, 3 against, with 2 not voting. But since it received the requisite number of votes, 2/3 or more, it was referred to us, and so that's how it wound up on the ballot. In terms of the policy changes, there would be several key changes that are important. First, $85 billion would go to K through 12 public schools, right? And $1.5 billion would be allocated to community colleges. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, both Eric and I teach at College of the Canyons. As such, while we wouldn't personally benefit if the proposition passes, College of the Canyons might. And so in the interest of full disclosure, we felt like it was important to say that. The funds would be spent to construct new facilities, to renovate aging infrastructure, to address unsafe or outdated buildings. It also prioritizes projects that enhance technical education, transitional kindergarten, which I'll explain in a minute, and charter school facilities. And it also deals with drinking water. We'll talk about that more in a second. The state typically covers between 50 and 60% of the cost of new construction and renovation projects, with local school districts picking up the remainder of the tab. If Proposition 2 passes, these costs will be shared. They'll continue to be shared, but the state's contribution could increase between 55 to 65% for certain districts, but especially those with lower property values or a higher percentage of low-income students, English learners, or foster youth. Proposition 2 also includes funding to expand and renovate classrooms specifically for transitional kindergarten programs. So what does that mean? Starting in the 2025-2026 school year, California plans to make kindergarten available to all eligible 4-year-olds. This funding would be used to accommodate the additional children who would enroll. Finally, up to $115 million would be used to reduce lead contamination in drinking water at public schools. Now, as with many bond measures, Proposition 2 requires oversight and accountability. This usually involves regular audits and the creation of a citizens oversight committee to go ahead and monitor the way the money is spent. And since the creation of citizen oversight committees are common to bond measures, we thought it might be useful to explain how they're formed. So for school bonds, people are selected to be on these committees by the governing board of the school district or the community college. So they are the people who put the committee together. The composition of the committees is usually designed to represent the views of the community as a whole. So there might be a member from the business community, people who represent senior organizations, taxpayer organizations. Frequently, parents or guardians of a student in the district will be on there. And then sometimes a student themselves who attends the district will be on the Citizens Committee as well. And what they do generally is they submit an annual report to the board explaining how the money is or isn't being spent and whether it's being done efficiently. So that's the setup. What are the fiscal impact if Proposition 2 passes? Well, there would be the bond. The bond is a $10 billion bond, so the state would repay the $10 billion over 30 years, over 35 years. But there's also interest on the bond. And so including both the principal and the interest, the estimated cost is approximately $500 million per year. The total repayment cost will be about 10% more than the $10 billion borrowed, which is typical for bonds that are paid over a long period of time. These repayments would be made from the state's general fund. The general fund is sort of the checkbook that the state deposits money into and then pays for things. The estimated cost of this is less than 0.5% of the state's general budget. In terms of the net impact on local government, the proposition could either increase or decrease local costs depending on how districts respond to the passage of the proposition. But according to the legislative analyst, it's difficult to quantify the statewide effects on local offices. In terms of its impact on school districts, Proposition 2 does allow school districts that cannot raise at least $15 million from local bonds to apply for additional funding from the state. This could result in more state financial support for smaller and less wealthy districts. Now, in terms of the arguments in favor of Proposition 2, California's public schools and community colleges need significant upgrades to ensure safety and provide modern learning environments. Many buildings are outdated, unsafe, and lack facilities necessary for effective education. Additionally, Proposition 2 provides funds to expand transitional kindergarten facilities and technical education classrooms, helping prepare students for future success from early childhood all the way through their careers. The measure also allocates funds to reduce lead levels in the school water systems, ensuring that schools meet health standards and protect students from harmful contaminants. Finally, by increasing the state's share of construction and renovation costs for districts with lower property values or higher percentages of low-income students, Proposition 2 reduces funding disparities between wealthier and poorer districts. And then actually, lastly, investments in construction and renovation projects will stimulate the economy by creating jobs in local communities. The arguments against Proposition 2 are as follows. Issuing $10 billion in bonds will significantly increase state debt. The state would be obligated to pay back approximately $500 million annually over 55 years, adding pressure to the state budget. The state will pay more than just the amount of the bond, since it'll have to pay interest as well. It would be more fiscally responsible to fund projects with existing revenue rather than borrowing money, especially given the state's projected budget deficits. Proposition 2 will encourage local governments to rely on state funding instead of raising money through their own local bond measures. And although the bond directs funds to specific types of schools, there's no guarantee that all schools in California will benefit equally from passage of the bond. Now, in terms of who's recommending votes in favor, this one is interesting. And actually, there's a mistake on this. So the California Republican Party, the California Democratic Party, the California Chamber of Commerce, the California Labor Federation, and although it doesn't show it on there, the Los Angeles Times all recommend a yes vote. The Los Angeles Daily News recommends a no vote. So what does a yes vote mean? A yes vote supports issuing $10 million in bonds to fund construction and modernization of public education facilities. A no vote opposes issuing $10 billion in bonds to fund construction and modernization of public education facilities.